Hello, people. This week, I had a pleasant surprise. I read, what is this? Lords of the Starship. Who's it by? Hold on. Mark Geston. Okay, now, the version I got is all together, right? Apparently, this is 3 books. Did not know it when I got it. What did I know about it when I got it? You see this sort of laser beam? Laser beam V Dragon? Yeah, that's all your boy needed, honestly, to get this book. Lords of the Starship. What is it about? Why did I like it? It doesn't read like a lot of books, like a lot of other books. Okay, so if you go to a lot of books will do like a Lord of the Rings style appendices, right? A lot of extra history at the end of your story. Well, now imagine that at the sort of the beginning. That's what this feels like. It feels like a history and a lore. Now, normally, again, those things are just listed off. And so you lose any kind of narration, so to speak, right? That the story follows characters and you like those characters, and so you like the story. How do you do that when it's history, when, characters come in and out or come and go? Well, our tie, the thing that binds this history is this ship. So we start with a Sir Henry Limpkin. I thought it was odd to start. I was annoyed at the start just because of the name, but it grew on me, honestly. And it's literally just page 1. It's he gets the call to go talk to an important general, a General Toryman. And our author, again, establishing in this ride to this old castle, it's not just, it's clearly horse and buggy. I don't know, I can't tell. It doesn't say, is the world Earth? Is it not Earth? Doesn't ever say. These are humans. I get a British feel, which I just like in general, but it gives it sort of a dignified feel, I can say. Caltroon, 700-year, he goes, this line in it is, it's a 700-year history. It started as a small fort to a forgotten empire. And they do this a lot in this book. So what you end up discovering on the course of the first bits is not just sort of, the city of Troy. You know how they say there's 7 Troys? Because this one was built and it crumbled, and that one was built on top and then it crumbled, and then that one was built and it got raided, burnt, buried, and another one, this kind of, but do that for the whole world. Something's happened on this world in the course of 2,000 years where there's been a rise and a fall and then successive rises and falls. So these people have in their minds other technologies, right? Machine guns, maybe tanks. But they ascribe that to almost a forgotten age, where there's the myth of this thing that shot cannons. But any cannons we find are rusted, old, unreliable. So we settle with a horse and a carriage. We settle for a sword, and maybe like a musket, right? It's this kind of one world living right next to and amidst the rubbles of another. It's described as a hard environment. And that's not too unusual. But he blends it, like I said, with this story of the ship. Because our guy Limpkin meets Toryman. Toryman gives him this full idea. He says, like, we've looked at the state of the world and it's hopeless. He goes, that's the key is the hopelessness. That anytime anyone in this society tries to make a dam or run power line or anything useful, that the people don't have enough drive to finish the idea. And once it doesn't finish, they say it sucks, and we just get further into hopelessness. There's a lot of barren wasteland. It's a struggle to survive, constant wars and upheaval. They're in the Caroline Empire, which, side note, our boy starts us with a map. So you know it's going to be fun if it starts with a map. Now, the map doesn't end up too terribly important. He doesn't get bogged down in geography. But it's just, you could tell he thought about it. But the Toryman, the general's idea is that in his wars, in his travels, he's found remnants of what they called the First World. Now, again, we don't know exactly. We just know it was some pinnacle. Some pinnacle that self-destructed in some way. He says, we found some of their technology. They call it the yards. Described as just this almost to the horizon amount of cement and building. You know how big. I'm imagining how sort of modern construction or ports would feel like if you brought someone back from like the 1700s or 1600s or something. You know what I mean? You would just, they struggle to build castles, and then we just have like miles of cement that fight off the ocean. This is the idea you get from these things. He says that in there we found pieces of what could be a very large ship. And his idea is to sell this to the people, to say, you won't make it and your kids won't make it, but somewhere down the line, we'll finish this ship and we can all leave this horrible planet. That this idea of some better place would be the drive. And he says that the whole of the Carolinian society could work towards that end. And then the people on top, the people who know the secret, would then divert some subtly out, right? So if you need 5 power lines for the ship, then 3 can be sent out. And in the course of 100 or 200 years, that without knowing it, the people would have built up their own country so that it's green again and livable and nice, and then they won't care so much to leave. This is his idea. And he tells this guy, Lemkin, and he needs him to sell it to the king. I think it's King George the 28th. It's just fun to me. That's his grand scheme. So, again, this early parts was reminding me of Dune, because Dune plays a lot with propagandas, right? So it's propaganda from the propagandist side, that it's open and obvious to them, and they have no qualms of tricking the people, and it's clearly for the people's benefit. That's their thinking. But he thinks it's going to take a long time, and that's the other part. From one chapter to the next in this book, hold on. See, one chapter might just be a page, and then we go right to the next. Now, from here to here, you get 60, 70 years that go by, right? He doesn't bother with filling in every detail of every decade. And he doesn't lose track of what 70 years means. This group will age out. This group will age in. What does it mean to a youth who's aged into this thing? And we get these class stratifications. And then those stratifications have an effect on the rest of the history, etc., etc. Does a very good job. It's more complicated than it seems, to be honest. And altogether, it's not this first one. Did I mark it? This first book isn't going to be too terribly long, right? But, Alice in Wonderland is not that long. Doesn't mean it's not good. A lot of the jargon, right? So, because this time has affected our history. They'll talk about, like, let's say a nuke. I think they call them black pills. They have different names for different stuff. But you start to get the sense of a people detached from the reality of a history. So, what is it like? I think in World War II, we would set up air bases on islands with remote tribes. And of course, you're bringing in food, you're bringing in all this. Well, the war ends, you just leave. The tribe didn't understand. So what the tribe did to get the people back, because they still wanted the food and all the other perks that came with an army establishment on their setup, they built like a mock landing pad, a mock tower out of bamboo. You know, like it's all made of wood. It's not real. But they thought the structure is what brings them, right? So it's a disconnect from the reality of the technology. This happens in this book. So they don't call things a tank, but who clearly describe a tank, some kind of futuristic looking tank that is mutinized and has all the extra, because you can then see it didn't work, and a lesser technological group tacked their technology on to get it to work, or they'll start thinking that was just magic. And of course, in your head, you're like, that wasn't magic. It was a laser weapon. It was a nuclear bomb. It's, you know, these kind of things. So you start to feel the blending of the history of this stuff without the knowledge of knowing that it's a technological feat. And it blends right into the culture of the people. Very cool. So the Limkin guy gets the thing going. 40, 50 years goes by. He dies. The next batch up then carries on the mission. At some point, what did I say? I'm looking at the book instead of my notes. Silliness. At some point, not far in, I think within that first 40 years, they need, or maybe after 50, it's some time, they worry about a disconnect. You need, okay, and to clear up and solidify their area, the Republic of Caroline. Then the yards isn't attached, so they have to make it to the yards. So they're going to need a clear path there. But on top of needing a clear path, the distance they have an issue with. So they say if the people cannot see this ship, and they won't see it for a while, because it's going to take a while to build, they need some other thing to grasp onto. Sort of like how the Alamo inspired the Texas Revolution. Right? You need an epic battle of some sort. They clearly say the bloodier the better. And so they merge their two problems, and they start a situation, I think, with the nation of Yuma. And again, I never looked back at the map. It's not that big of a deal. I'm assuming if you looked, it makes sense. But it's the idea of a false flag, right? Of a fake fight for reasons of their own. And we get introduced to Philip Rome. Now he does this a couple of times, where in the course of telling this history, some moment will become pivotal, and our historian, or whoever's telling the story, knows all the ins and outs because it's after the fact. So he'll drop a name of a character. That character only exists in this small section of the book, and then they're out of the story completely. So I get the full arc of their sort of interactions, but they're part of this bigger arc of the ship. But in no point are these things all, this character might never meet that one. We don't get this one's resolution, so to speak, because his moment in life, his moment in history was what he did to interact with this ship. We get this a lot in this book. And it isn't annoying at all. It really isn't. So we set up our Philip Rome for this purposeful but disposable battle, let's say. We get this line before the battle starts. Okay. numerous ways of warping body and mind out of its proper shape with thousands of years of war-orientated science. I said, what? Next paragraph, we're fighting what they say half men, mutants, mutated animals. So it's a snake the size of a boat. It's gargoyle type humans with wings that fly. Who knows what kind of mutants have what kind of issues. I mean, and it gets dropped right in. And because it's from their perspective, you sort of take it like they take it. And it doesn't throw you out of the verisimilitude of the overall history of this shit. It's fascinating. You're just fascinated looking at it. It's very, very fun. Because now the wheels are almost off where I'll almost accept anything that's happening. It has momentum because we're not harping on any of it. He doesn't spend the time, other than that line, to try and delve too much into, well, let me explain how the mutant was made. No. You just know 1,000 years ago, what did they call it? Gene radiation bombs went off. Sounds effective, but what's the aftermath? Like of Chernobyl, but in 1,000 years, but people were in there. You have these half freaky people segregated into this area, and then they live for 1,000 years, build up their own cultures, build up their own issues. I think one of them, they see the attack coming, they send one guy out. He knows he's going to die, but it's like a weird cultural, historical thing where he's just going to be the first man out. They blitz him down. Then swarms of them come out. That was like the call. That's how they start every battle, with blood, right? So I'm like, there's some weird culture crap happening, but it's over there. And he doesn't bog the story down going into it. He just lets your imagination roll and just feed out. It's very fun. It's very, very fun. The battles, is the next point, are fairly vicious. I mean, we follow the nitty-gritty details of Philip Rome in this battle. The adrenaline pumping, people foaming at the mouth, gore and death everywhere. It's fairly vicious. And then boom, we'll cut away from that. Success, they say. From a chaotic battle right back into the propaganda. Now here, I think they mentioned... Hold on, make sure I didn't miss a page. They mentioned the dark powers. Right? Because our Philip Rome's like, whatever the dark powers may send out, we'll fight against. And at some point he sees what can only be described as like 5 wizards. He calls them wizards. They start shooting fireballs out. Now, again, I've already seen in my mind's eye some of their technology misrepresented by persons involved in the history. Naturally. They don't know. Let's say if you didn't know what a plane is, you'd describe it as something, right? So in my head, I'm like, are they actual wizards? Or is this some kind of technology that this guy doesn't know and he's just attributed it to the dark powers? And then it comes up again, so now I wonder, I'm like, the First Age Empire, were they fighting some dark power that's real? Or was that just what you call your enemy for propaganda? I start to not get confused. I'm starting to be sold on the propaganda just like their people would have, right? So it weirdly connects me more to the story. Wonderfully done. We then get Tribley, another guy. Now, what they've started to do, again, there was always going to be a batch of people who understood that the ship's fake. And, of course, they put themselves in power because they're smarter and better than everyone. And who better to lead than our smart people, right? If it comes with better housing and better food, I mean, it's just... They have more responsibility, right? Yeah. We've heard it before. They start calling themselves the Technos. Our Tribbley says that him and his technicians have been in amongst the yards. And there aren't just some pieces. He says there's all the pieces. He says below our feet is a first world ship. 100%. The engine, the parts, the propulsion, the frame, the body, all of it, the whole in pieces down below us. Do we know how to make it work? Not particularly. But we could put it all together and then maybe figure out how to work it. And this is like a twist, right? Because they weren't supposed to get it fixed. So he's like the main guy in charge. It's like, okay, that's nice, but we need to stagger this thing now. We can't get it done too quick or it defeats the purpose. We get shown, and they don't show the names. I don't think they have us names. But 2 Technos, young. Clearly a man and a woman sort of talking to each other. Star-filled night in what should be, or what's represented as, sort of their version of love. With all this power struggle and suspicion behind it, right? And what you see is they both know again that the ship's not supposed to go because they're Technos. They're privy to that knowledge. But because more of the ship's being built and it's miles long and it's chromed out of its mind, it's starting to affect their psyche. They're starting to, like the guy is constantly not even looking at her, but they're just at the ship. And he's imagining him crewing the ship, him and his Technos flying it somewhere, that it could go. But we know it can't, but what if it could? You know, you're starting to try and live the lie. For her part, she's also dreaming, not of the ship, but of where it could take her. The green land, a pleasant place. They call it home. There's this great place to end up. And so you see it even affecting the Technos. They're buying into the lie, so to speak. We have the Admiralty, things like the Office of Procurement, the Office of Extraterritorial Intelligence, right? Official sounding places. Again, they help sell the overall, what do we say, verisimilitude, the realness that the thing feels. At one point, the OEI, I love it, wants to investigate, right? It's come to their attention that they haven't checked anything in a hot second, that they're relying completely on paperwork saying, yes, this is cleared, no, this isn't. So they send a group out. The first group just disappears. The second group, we mentioned in our history, they're checking lines, power lines, and you could be 100 miles down and you travel in this on horseback because it's, you don't have, I think they had one working car, one truck, and it was janky. It's unreliable. So they exist, but they're not in any way usable a lot of times. So they would travel this 100 miles by horse, these aristocrats in the middle of the woods, and they find a power plant and they test the lines. And what should be 2 working lines and 3 dummy ones are, 5 real lines. All of them have power, which to them is more shocking because there are no more settlements that way. The 5 lines are all diverting real power back into the ship area, into the yards. That's not what's supposed to be happening, right? So they know not good things are going on, but they're going to report in as soon as they can. That night they get attacked. Our guy, again, they name him. They name this guy and then never mention him again after this chapter. Annadale. Annadale sees a first world tank mutated, with all these horrible hoses and... See, now, I don't know. Is that just how tanks work? Are they just loud? Or is he mythologizing the first world to be sleek beyond measure and perfect? I'm not exactly sure. It plays very cool, though. He doesn't get killed by the tank. He goes back and he warns everyone, like, the crap's hit the fan. And he exits stage left. We don't see him again. Cut to Shane the Techno. Sort of a fat guy. He's there, okay. He's there right as the crap hits the fan. And he just gets caught up in, there's a revolution. There's a people's revolution. And we have to fight to see if we're going to maintain control of the ship or if we lose it. And they give us a full bloody battle of this sort of, like a revolution of the people. They don't have any of the best weapons. Our technos use the ship as sort of cover. And it's just open season with Gatling guns and this kind of thing. But the people are overwhelming. They didn't fight in a way that preserves anyone, right? So if you're fighting an army and the army doesn't want to die, there's rules. But if you're fighting crazy people that throw their bodies on machine guns, then there's not many strategies to beat that. Which the Technos didn't beat. They all died horribly. Or most all of them. Our Shane does die. And in his, dying state, he watches, the remnants of his... what was his society, right? Because he's 70-something years in. That's just how society works for him. Just evaporate. He's watching a bunch of young technos get corralled into an area. And a guy named Coral, the head general of the people, give them a choice to join and actually fix the ship or leave. The one who leaves is, I think, our lady of the romance, right? She ends up going to the Drissau Islands and talking to an Admiral Radloff. Now, they say these set of islands are the last remnant of the first world. So, when whatever happened, like the fall of Rome or something, right? Here was a batch of people who stayed Roman, so to speak, and understood what they were clearly down to now. But then, you're on islands. You don't have the people or the access. So you should have a ship that flies in the air, but you don't have the means to make it anymore. And you can't put 2,000-3,000 years into that without people just, giving up on this or that. That's what's happened to him. His whole area is a bit hopeless. Apparently, they saw their last great battle against, I want to say Salazar? Or they sent 2,000 ships, and it was a horribly bloody battle, and 3 came back. His fleet's maybe the strongest on Earth, but he also knows that it's just the shadow of a memory of what it was before. So he gets wind from this girl of this ship, and he sees it as sort of almost a continuation of that mission, right? Of that battle they had 1,000 years ago. That he's like, this is why our society lived this long. And either we're going to finish off what we should have finished off, or we're going to die trying. And if we finish it off in his mind, I'm assuming he thinks we can reestablish the whole thing. Even if he doesn't really tactilely remember what the whole thing entailed. Right? The whole thing's never coming back. But we have these hopes and dreams. So he's like, we're prepping all our ships to go attack this big ship. And that's our plan. He sets that plan in motion. He dies because years go by and his second in command takes over. And they're getting ready just to go out and attack this ship. Now, right in the middle of this, just before the final battle, we get introduced to a Kirill. I think that's how you say it. His intro. Kirill had lived longer than any mortal had a right to. Born a man, but the wars, the bombs, the poisons, the radiation, heat, and the wizards of Salazar had turned him into a dark, semi-living shape which spent its time in the shadows. Now that's some wild, far out there crap, but it's sort of the tail end of the book, and by now, like I said, it comes with such a pace, and everything feels so real, and some of it's such myth from the people that I'm almost willing to accept anything. He gave me a half plausible reason as to what this thing is. But I'll take it at face value. I'm like, I'm gonna just go with it. I take it. It doesn't ruin the story at all. Even as fantastical as it sounds, it still feels like science fiction. And so it's this shadow thing. It's this shadow thing that it eats the mummy of a king in his own tomb, and then sits in the tomb that the king was in. And that makes that his home until, I don't know, he thinks that, I don't know, whenever the world ends or whenever I can, get released from this endless existence I have. And he somehow is like, when the final battle happens, he's just feeling like disturbances in the force kind of thing. So I'm like, we never come back to him. I don't know what the crap's happening with that. I know I'm very interested, but I don't know what's going on. He freaks the crap out. The final battle, all these ships, all these nations converge on the ship, and it's just carnage. It's just carnage, and by now you get some sense that something else is going on, right? Like, it's too many years. It's too long. It seems planned, but how can you plan over that amount of time? But as I'm thinking that, obviously, I can't harp too much on it because there's a bloody battle going on. I think in the end, the ship starts, turns, and then like the engines cut on and it was like vaporize 1 million or 2 million people that were on the beach or whatever. And then it like crashes into the ground. So I don't know exactly what happened. I would say it's hard to track what's going on, but that's what happens in an actual battle, right? An actual war, They say it's just chaos and it's just craziness. You get a great sense of that. And then the very end is the old plot twist. We get characters. Torrymane, General Tin, Torrymane, Coral. Some of these cats who started the thing, who supposedly died about 200 years ago, are walking onto this field of battle after the battle's done. And they seem highly satisfied with what's happened. And then sort of that's how the book ends. So you're like, how the crap are these people alive? What's their plan? Is there anyone on the ship? Is the ship going to actually leave? Right? But then also you get a sense that something must have happened, even in the way it was written, because it's written as a history. So someone from the outside of a history had to sit and, write this out. So you do already get a sense that something else went on. There's a furtherance here. And it would almost, because you don't get any personal resolutions, right? You don't get the question's not answered of the Kirill. The question's not answered of these generals and how they lived for 400 years. There's no typical resolution. But our resolution comes from the fact that the ship was built. And so in that sense, it ends up feeling like a great, complete story. And along the way, I get introduced to this great world building that I'm interested in all parts of. And I got these memorable events that happened because it went so quick. I didn't get bogged down in any way. It's tremendous story. What's rating at the end? 4 out of 5 I'd give it. Easily. I was shocked. Again, I had no hype going in, and I'm shocked at how good the book is. I really am, especially since so few stories have taken this sort of angle, right? You could get all of your world building done on the side. So many try and work it in as they tell their story, and it sometimes overbloats the thing, right? So your Wheel of Time does this, where if he'd have just sat and told me the lore like this, then started his journey, it might have been a tighter story. But he didn't, and this guy did, and so he gets the credit. All right, that was Lords of the Starship. I'm definitely going to read the other two. Again, not next week. I'm going to keep it varied. I am a YouTuber. But now it's time for the ads. These are my books. If you like these videos, this is how you can help the channel. Buy a book. Or just watch. Or subscribe. Whatever you feel like, right? I'm going to make these anyway, so I think I'm good either way. Also, if you don't want to buy all of them, I suppose you can get if they still have it in the future. If you're watching this in the future and they're still Kindle Unlimited, you can read all my books there. I think I get like money like a Spotify, so don't act like it doesn't help the cause, because it will. All right. Talk to you next week.